Agrippa could have done. You don't let Paul, you can't let a preacher get the mic. You can't let somebody who's got fire shut up in his bones testify or say, you got 5 minutes and let's keep it down to 5 minutes and make sure you just get up there, come dry, and just talk and defend yourself. Paul looked at it as the greatest opportunity to defend the faith and stand up for his God and testify about what God had done in his life. And King Agrippa looks at him and says, Paul, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk for yourself. Then Paul, I like this. Like Moses, stretched forth his hand and began, one version says, and began to preach. Your King James says, mildly, and Paul answered him back. But another translation says, Paul took full advantage of the opportunity and said, listen, you just opened up the platform to me. You just gave me the pulpit. You just handed me the mic. And you better be ready for what I'm about to give you. It says, look at verse 2. I'm happy right now. Oh God. I've never been given this opportunity, Paul says. I'm bubbling over with joy, King Agrippa, because I will answer you for myself on this very day, and I will touch on the things whereof the Jews have accused me of. Paul begins to, oh God. Agrippa's this over-ambitious politician who doesn't know who Paul is, but says, you know what, I'm going to go let you talk for yourself. And the minute Paul, with the authority of Almighty God, begins to preach, I would imagine Agrippa, whoa, what in the world in his mind? He's it's just like when you go to the judge after you've been in the home a while and you've got a good testimony and you're on fire, and the judge says, we need to take an evaluation of what you're doing on in Victory Outreach. We're going to go ahead and let you talk and defend yourself and tell us a little bit about what's been going on with you in that place called Victory Outreach. And for those of you that have truly been converted and saved and have had an experience with God, you know the first thing that's going to come out of you, Judge, I used to be a drug addict, and I used to be a gang member, and I was lost and out of my mind. As a matter of fact, I stood before you and you were ready to give me life without the possibility of parole. But one day, when you released me into the custody of those Victory Outreach folks, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I walked into a Holy Ghost miracle, and God got a hold of my life. And I want you to know, I don't want to be a carpenter. I don't want to be a cement layer. I don't want to be a truck driver. I want to preach the uncompromised word of Almighty God. Oh, you all know what that's like. Paul said, listen, you did yourself wrong, buddy. You gave me the wrong mic at the wrong time. I have a smile on my face. I've got double barrels loaded, and I'm about to fire them both off. Notice what he says in verse 3. Especially because I know that you are evaluating everything that I say, every question I present, every argument that I bring forth, everything I know, Agrippa. You're looking at everything. Every little word, you're hoping to find some fault. Well, there ain't going to be no fault here. Agrippa, you ain't going to hear a mistake from me. My manner of life from youth, verse 4, my manner of life from youth, which at first was among my own nation in Jerusalem, knowing all of the Jews, I understood their religion. I lived as a Pharisee, but now I stand by them judged in hope of the promise that God has given to our forefathers. From this point on, Paul begins to revert back to the Damascus Road. You know, he tried to get a little educated there for a minute. And he tried to talk to Agrippa in a legal manner. You know, Agrippa, I'm like you. I went to church all my life. I was a religious man. I was a Pharisee among Pharisees. My daddy was a Pharisee. He was a very devout religious man. And he tried to talk to him in this religious type of manner. But then the old Paul came out. He thought he was in a street meeting. He thought he was in a camp meeting. He thought he was preaching to a whole bunch of sinners. And he begins to go in to his testimony. You know, when all else fails, use your ace in the hole. When your sermon starts to fail you and you ain't got nothing else to preach and you run out of words with what people are trying to, they're trying to mimic everything you're saying. They're trying to, dissect every ounce of your sermon. And when all else fails, all you've got left in the holster is, listen, I may not know all the pros and cons of the gospel, but one thing I do know, I know what happened to me on the Damascus Road when Jesus interrupted my miserable life, and a light shone from heaven. I was blinded, and I was taken by the hand all the way. I'm trying. Give me an opportunity. So Paul begins to preach this testimony. And I like what he says because he gets near the end of it. All the way down in verse 19. He says, King Agrippa, I gave you everything I've got, everything I had in me. But from that day until now, I've never disobeyed the call that God had upon my life. From the moment I received it, from the moment I was converted, from the moment I encountered this Jesus of Nazareth, from that moment until now, I've never turned back. I've never looked back. I've never disobeyed. I've never given in. I've never run out. I have stood obedient to this call. And the room was quiet. King Agrippa, his eyes are tears on. His last words. He says, you almost got me. You almost persuaded me to become a Christian. This was the best we've had. This was the number one man. This was the Apostle Paul speaking to one of the highest in authority, Agrippa himself. He gave him both the intellect, both the spirit, and the testimony. And after he gives him everything he's got, Agrippa looks at him, and his mind is boggled. It's like that judge you went before. You know what, man? You almost had me. You almost. That close, buddy. I almost believed you. I almost became